Hello. Well, some of you may know what this car is, but the vast majority don't. So what is this? We are looking at this one in particular is a 1982 or a 1983 Ford EXP, and this is the very special ASC McLaren prototype. The story goes they made two of these cars, and I'm going to share with you every photo that I have of one of these, and then we'll start talking about the second one. So, the only information out there on these are from three sources of mine. One would be the EXP Wikipedia page. Most of this I myself had written up. The second source is the actual owner of one of those cars. The one that I'll be showing you photos of. I've been in good touch with one of the prior owners, and he's shared a lot about his time having it. He's a big EXP collector. He doesn't have as many as I do, but he has had as many as I do now, and every single one of his have been absolute pristine cars. He only accepts the finest. The third source of information on this said car is through this book. It is through this magazine that we have the most access and the most information on the ASC McLaren EXP. The most. So we're looking at Auto Week, specifically the December 6th, 1982 version. So let's start with this. So and you're able to get this. This pops up on eBay every now and then, but because it doesn't do it very frequently, I've decided to make this video since I was finally able to attain one. And Oop. Jimi Hendrix has been here. So page 22, that's where we want to be. Now I have gone and I've read through this whole thing, and it took a while. There's a good 15-20 minutes of reading here. It occupies this whole entire page and then half of the second page. And keep in mind, this is a really big, magazine. It's dang near 11 left to right, and about 15, 16 from top to bottom inches. This is the mysterious article. This has almost all the information on this car. And some of the information is a little contradictory. We will talk about some of those details here, but let's get started. So again, this is written in 1982. So looking here in December of 1982. Kind of talks about it some, just to get some day stamps going. So in the first EXP appearance is in the for Auto Week anyways. The first EXP review for Auto Week is in the edition March 9th, 1981. So I'll get that in my hand someday. That one's pretty neat. It's got a lot of, well, not a lot, but it's got a few prototype photos. You'll see EXPs with nose cones, and the grills are simply painted on because they were the smoothed over prototypes, but they removed the round badge, stuck the blue oval on, and then they painted black where the grill would end up being. And that kind of passed mustard. Anywho. Yeah, so somewhere between March 9th of 81 and December 6th of 82, ASC McLaren got their hands on one, supposedly two, Ford EXPs, and these would have to be 82, maybe 81 models. Okay, pardon me. Real quick, I looked through my records. I actually have the VIN number of this car. So I looked at the VIN number, and it does show being an 82 model. It's very early. We're talking around the 6,000th EXP to leave the line. This one's right around that mark. So that would be 82 for sure. I'm going to quick look at my stuff here. Going off of the number provided, this EXP would have been made sometime in March or April of 1981. So I'm sure ASC McLaren was able to get their hands on it very shortly afterwards. But anywho, let me show you all the information I have here. This is a pretty good summary for not having all the details. Now that I have the article, which has a very, very comprehensive breakdown of everything that was done to it, all this information here has definitely been confirmed off of this article. And what I've put on the Wikipedia page, it matches what I've read in the article just now, as I just got this today, and it matches my first-hand account from the... I believe at the time he would have been the second or third owner of the car. If the title was initially in ASC McLaren's name for 1982, then technically this gentleman would be the third or fourth owner. Anywho, I think we're getting a little off topic here. The car. So ASC McLaren gets a hold of a 1982 Ford EXP. Supposedly they get a hold of two. We don't know why, other than they felt that they could take a very neat, affordable car and make it closer somewhere along the lines of a Ferrari 308 GT. But you can kind of see the resemblance. I mean, if we do this, yeah, there's a little bit of 308 there. Anyhow, let's get down to the nuts. So this is the whole article here. You're welcome to pause it and read it as you please. We'll go through it kind of slowly. And I'm not going to read it word for word, but I am going to pick out some specifics. So they talk about a lot of the developments and what the AMC McLaren team has been up to prior to this car. And then they talk about their fascinations with turbochargers and superchargers and the pros and cons of each. So this whole first column is pretty crap as far as information goes. But the photos that they include are incredible. These are pretty much the best photos that we have of this car. The front corner, the wheels, the decals, the engine bay. This is the best photo we have of the original engine bay, and it's in print. And same with the interior. And the back end, which had some substantial modifications. Let's get back to the article. Here, the text. So after a bunch of work, oh yeah, they made it quick. 0 to 60 in 9.8 seconds is pretty quick. It sure is. That's about what the factory Turbo EXP did. I think it's like 9.5 or something like that. Maybe 9.3. Yes, 4.7 seconds quicker than the original car, the 1.64 speed. Being this car was built in March, it's hard saying what gear ratio was in it. It could have been the standard 4-speed, or it could have been the 4-speed that has the 405 gears, the Screamer transmission. That makes for a faster car. And we'll go over some of the engine stuff in detail. So they converted it to fuel injection, and it's running on premium. And it says here, our EXP was changed to fuel injection to suit the response characteristics of the blower setup. And that's an important point, because they're saying that they don't have an 83 model. It's not. The VIN shows an 82. And everything they've shown so far is 82 spec. But they mention that because by now you will have been able to order up an 83 EXP, and then rumors for 84, which include the turbo model, are slowly trickling down the grapevine. So they talk about it. Peak power came out to 121 horsepower at 5,200 RPMs. Torque came in at 137 foot-pounds at 2,800 RPMs. So all the work they did, it's pretty fascinating. These figures are pretty close to the Ford, the stock, the OEM EXP Turbo that would come out in 1984 model. So literally only a year after this. That car, the factory turbo, was rated at 120. I don't remember the RPM, and then torque is also right around that 120 foot-pounds mark, and it is somewhere around that 2,800, 2,600, somewhere in there. But yes, a substantial improvement over the stock 82, 69 horsepower, and even the new OEM fuel-injected engines that came out for 83. Rated at 84-ish horsepower. And then here it talks about more. This part I found particularly interesting. Unfortunately, the blower makes a lot of noise. Its drivability is questionable, and fuel economy on a 50-50 mix of light and heavy driving was anything but economical. Try 17 miles per gallon. Impressed? These cars, when they were stock, from 1982 all the way to 1988, all of the EXPs, they're all rated for 26 city and 44 or 46 highway. So typically your combined mileage would be somewhere around the 32, 35 mark. Maybe even a little bit better than that. That's what I get in my 4-speed car, and I even have the Screamer 4-speed. So 17 miles per gallon, horrific. And it goes further into turbo tech. And this part I found funny. In the age of steeply chiseled hood lines, there's not much room for a supercharger. The EXP, however, has enough room to accommodate such modifications. Very true. We go on. It shows that really nice photo that we got. We're getting to the suspension, but I wanted to show. Here we go. Turbochargers come to the point where you can do almost anything, and if done properly, they'll run almost forever. That was definitely not the case at the time. Just the motor oil of 1982 wasn't very good, so that didn't help turbo life. The other thing not helping turbo life was using Ron size impeller and compressors for the applications. They haven't quite done all the R&D that we have now. The other things that were catching up to with them at the time was they were all bushing bearings, plain bearings for the turbo shafts. So those have a tendency of wearing out pretty quickly, especially since oil lubrication was not very good because our oil quality was crap. The other problem was fuel delivery at the time wasn't as ideal as it is today. From the 1990s on to now, EFI systems have been able to fine-tune the mixture so that the engine and the turbocharger can actually live decent lives. as well as make some pretty impressive power. But again, back to it, they talk about the suspension modifications and the wheels and tires that they have chosen. One point of interest is they say that they use 205/50 R15 tires. That's a pretty wide tire. The stock car would have been set up with 175s, 185s, excuse me, depending on what kind of suspension package you ended up getting. Most of my cars, I'm running a 195 because for stock 81 to 83 suspension, if you exceed that 195 width, it doesn't really matter how tall you have the wheel and tire. It doesn't really matter how far you offset it. Reaching the 195 mark, your tire will end up rubbing the shock, rubbing the outside fender, or rubbing the inside frame. But they talk about just a little bit here that they had gone through and done quite a bit of machining to achieve negative camber, and that might have helped their cause. That I think that might have helped get them a wider tire so that they could install it, probably with spacers, so that it would clear the struts. That's kind of the easy thing. The hard thing is making it clear the fender and the frame. But if you can tweak the camber so it's more negative, maybe you can get away with clearing the fender better. I don't quite know yet. That's some trial and error I need to do for myself. If wheels look familiar, it's because they're straight off the European Escort RS. Everyone who sees them seems to like them. They are cool. The Escort RS wheels are very cool. However, I don't believe that that's exactly what these are. In 1984, you would see these wheels on Ford Tempos. And in 1991, you would see them on Ford Escorts. Now, keep in mind, for 91 to 96 on the Escorts, the wheel is identical. It's a 15-inch wheel, but 14-inch wheel, but it has 4x100 lug spacing. These 80 cars, they all take 4x108s. But actually, come to think about it, they're probably right. Because they say they got 15-inch tires on them. That's what they look like. And if these are 15-inch rims, they have to be the imported RS wheels. They're identical to the Tempo 7 spokes, except that the 7 spokes here in North America, they were only ever 14-inch in diameter, whereas these are most definitely 15-inch. Carrying on again, yep, and they brag about tires. Well, tires are tires. Luckily, Tire Tech has come a long way, and they foam over the mouth how they've been able to go from the Michelin TRXs to these Goodrich Comp TAs. Yeah, decent, very, very good tire at the time. Today we have even better ones, of course. More suspension. Here's where we go about it. So they retain the stock TRX springs, but they modified the cups above them. They cut them down an inch, and hence they lower the car 1 inch all the way around. I don't know if it really shows. This doesn't appear to ride any lower than any of my EXPs, but an inch really isn't much in the grand scheme of things. And then they go and they improve the camber. Like it says, they machine the uprights to put in 3/4 of a degree of negative camber in the front. Now that doesn't sound like much. Not even 1 whole degree of negative camber up front. But keep in mind, for 1981 to 1983, these have positive camber. They have 1 to 2 degrees of positive camber. So they had dropped it back 2 or 3 degrees. It's kind of substantial, and it reflects in their review of the handling. The shocks are made by Koni. Yeah, they took this TRX suspension and then they visited Koni and had I believe the Koni Reds thrown in there. That's what the stock turbos have. I'm not sure what they're talking about when it comes to the rack and pinion. Stiffened up the rack mountings for the steering and revalved the power steering pump for road. Oh, I see. Because they had power steering. See, that's not necessary. If I was them, I would have converted back to manual. You get better fuel. You get better feel. And you remove a lot of weight. Another problem with the power steering cars is they feel very floaty. The feel is dreadful between them. Oh geez, I mean the power, it works well. The problem is you don't need it. If you were stuck on a paved parking lot on a hot sunny day, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two as you sit. And when you drive down the road, if you drive the power steering one, wow, it feels like feels like every turn of the wheel is moving a bunch of feathers instead of moving, a rack and all the other mechanical pieces of the puzzle. It's very odd. So I see why they did it, but I would have gone the manual swap. But we keep reading. And they talk about how the suspension mods aren't for everybody, even though the outcome is. Talk about some of the brakes. They switched to semi-metallic pads, and they add a proportioning valve. That I found kind of interesting. So they doubled the bias to the rear, so they make the rears have twice the pressure. And now we finally get into the appearance. And the appearance is a big thing because we have this. This is a true notchback EXP. So let's review my photos here. These are good. I'll enlarge. Oops, sorry. Okay, so I have every photo of this car that's been shared to the world. So this is the car, right about the time it was sold. Or when it was listed on Craigslist many years ago. Yeah, you can see their Ford RS wheels and everything we see about the car is how it describes in the book. So on this car, they integrated a rear spoiler. Ford would later do this, but of a removable spoiler on the factory turbo models and every EXP from 86 to 88. There was a few dealer level spoilers much like that, and they actually do the same thing. They come forward all the way to the hatch line. And then we also have this lower chin spoiler up front. Again, that would be on all the turbo models just a year later. And then the rear was shaped a little differently on this guy. This one in particular, well, let's zoom in a bunch. Here we go. That's what we're talking about. So you can see that the entire deck is essentially flat, and the window that's in the back is very recessed. While the stock EXPs, it would follow these C pillars, not be recessed. So if you're familiar with the Dodge Charger from say 1969, 1970, that window is recessed, much like this. Dodge Charger, the 500, Dodge Charger 500. This whole window is actually fast-backed, and they make it match these C-pillar lines. That's how the stock EXP is. It matches this, like a Charger 500. But on the ASC McLaren, they actually go and they make new glass, and they put it further in back. So now it looks like the plain Charger. They did a little bit of sculpting back in this corner. Trying to find all my photos here, go through them with you, so the back glass would kind of follow that better. I have interior photos of various types, boost gauge and vacuum. That's the interior, so it's a stock 82 EXP interior, but they add Recaro seats, and it has a Momo wheel. The article talks about it in better detail, and you can see the engine bay system. It's kind of a poor photo. It's really not hardly any better than this one. This one's probably better actually, because in here you can actually see the blow-off valve right here, and then right here I believe is the turbocharger, and then down here by the AC compressor, or where the AC compressor would have been, I believe, is a supercharger driven off of the nose end of the crank, like the timing belt. More interior photos of that car. So it was an AC car. I don't know if it retained it when they were done. The article talks about it. Some of the listing photos. Now the article says that by the time they had finished doing all the sculpting of the hatch, it says what they had to do was they sculpted out of clay. They sculpted the entire thing out of clay, and then they made a mold. Here we go. Once we established the appearance we wanted, we cast it, made a plaster mold, and did the hand layout fiberglass work. So all that remains of the stock hatch are some basic frame bits and latch and hinge hardware. However, that's not the case. Clearly we're looking at a 1982 Ford EXP stock hatch. So, if anything, these stock hatches are made with only two pieces of metal. They have the outer decorative skin, and then they have the lower skin. So I am betting they use the lower skin of metal, steel, and then they made a whole new fiberglass mold that drops in over top of it. Because this is the listing photo from about 2011. So I believe the whole under skin of metal is rotting away, but the whole top skin remains, and it kind of looks like it is fiberglass, and that would be why it remains. Fiberglass isn't going to rust, and because they cut it, they didn't necessarily rust proof the raw metal of the lip of the metal after you've cut it. It's now exposed to the air. There's nothing protecting it, and that's why it rots like that. That's the interior we mentioned. That's that Momo racing seat. The ASC McLaren floor mats, and the special Recaro seats. That's it leaving towards home. Here's another interesting point of contention. You can see that in the whole back area here, the car was a silver car. And then ASC McLaren painted it red. So I have the VIN. Someday I'll run the Marty report on this guy, and we'll find out how it was leaving the factory. This underhood shot is kind of interesting. You can see a lot going on. Check out that really tall fuel rail. And then the entirely custom intake manifold for this thing. I'd love to see it in person, because Lord knows what it is. It's also it looks like a fuel filter over here. Stock exhaust manifold, and then they cut off the steel tubing below it, or right below the pancake joint, and then that's where they tap into the exhaust for, say, the turbo. And in this photo, you can actually see This right here is the supercharger. It's feeding air behind the exhaust manifold over to the side, and right over here is where the turbo resided. I don't know if it has it or not in this photo, but that's where it was. And in this photo you can see that's kind of where it was too. And then it goes up around the back through a throttle body into the intake manifold. The same story here. Okay, and then this is a copy and paste from the ASC McLaren official forums, and it talks about the whole car, or at least the Craigslist ad of the car way back when, 2011ish again. So let's carry on. So that was the hatch. Special paint and graphics. Yeah, the ASC McLaren decal. It's pretty interesting. It's actually gradient. You'll see clearly in this photo towards the top it's thin lines, and at the bottom it's solid. And of course they painted the two-tone feature, the yellow stripe, all of that. And then they talk about the interior modifications. Wasn't very many. One thing I somehow skipped over was the transmission work. I probably overlooked it. You'll be able to pause it at some point in there and figure it out. Oh, there we go. There's the shifter linkage. So they modified the linkage, supposedly refined it some. So they were able to make the throw much shorter and tighter. And there are a few ways of going about doing this. So in these cars, the shifter linkage, it's all linkage. It's not cable. So it's all rods that move back and forth with a few pivot points. So if you can keep those pivot points free of slop, that'll help keep your shifter nice and crisp. The other thing you can do is for the short throws is the lever itself. If you can imagine as my finger. Down at the tip of my finger, let's say that's where you put your hand to actually shift between gears. But right here at my big knuckle, we're going to call that the main pivot. So on the shifter lever, that's a ball. Right here is going to be a big ball, and that's where the whole thing pivots off from. And that pivot point is attached to the car. But down here, the knuckle attached to my hand, this one, that one is attached to all the linkage. So as this pivots around, it moves your linkage in and out, and then it twists it to a certain degree, and that's how you get into all of your gears. What you can do is, for one, you can make the shifter shorter, but that doesn't really do too much in the way of making your throws shorter. I mean, it has technically made your throws shorter, but it hasn't made them easier. You know, the mechanical leverage. Now you're trying to move something really tiny pretty far versus something pretty long pretty far. It's much easier. So what they do is they move the balls. They move the pivot points. So the main ball we move from this knuckle to up here, and then the one attaching to the linkage under the car we move from this knuckle to this one. So suddenly the shifter can now pivot like this amongst my topmost knuckle, and then down here is where it actually moves the linkage around. So by doing that, you're actually able to have shorter, tighter throws. The cost is it's so much further in the console, but it doesn't have to be like that. You can move those two balls around and make the stick taller, so then it's even more notchy. But I don't know how, I don't know how necessary that is. is my Silver 83. That's got the tightest transmission that any of these cars has ever had. And that's absolutely fine. It doesn't take much to make these cars that good and then keep them that good. But anywho, so that was kind of it. You're welcome to read this here. And I will share a link in the description at some point over the coming days or weeks, because I'll have photos of each of these or scans for these, and I'll put them in a shared source, and then I'll put that link for the source inside the photo descriptions, or inside the video description, so we'll able to go from there. But that's about what I wanted to share with you. But again, it was pretty interesting. Supposedly they made 2 of these cars, and I've ridden ASC McLaren myself, and they say, must have been a prototype car. We don't have any records of such car ever being made or existing, yada, yada, yada. So it's kind of a dead end if you get a hold of them. But you're welcome to visit the ASC McLaren forums. That's where some of this information is. I do have a couple up right now. Yeah, have you seen this EXP? It's pretty wild. And then, hey, I found this EXP for sale. What in the world? And it stands out because if you ignore the headlight covers, it passes off as an EXP turbo. But when you notice the headlight covers, you think, oh, well, wait a second. No other EXP is like this. We've seen some where they got flat ones, but these are round molded units. These are made very specifically for this car. And then it's when you start finding the other details, you're like, oh, well, hold on. One of such it talks about in this article is they made a much like the headlight covers. It's a semi. You know what it is? A clear Lexan, but it's smoked to some degree. So they have a Lexan cover over the license plate, and that's why that's kind of flush to the tail lights instead of being recessed and completely vertical like all the stock ones are. And that was a discrepancy in the literature here. It says that they used LN7 taillights because they have a better profile and they're more flat. But that's not strictly the case, nor is that what this car is wearing. This car is just running plain 82 EXP taillights. Even in all of my photos from the owner. Red taillights. Red taillights. Red taillights. Red taillights. Red taillights. Red taillights. It's the EXP taillights. So I'm not sure what had happened there. But that could be one of those things where maybe they did have that second car. And some of the information was kind of crossed between them when it shouldn't have been. But yeah, if you know anything else about this card, please feel free to say so in the description. This is the only video of this car ever out there, period, at all. So I find that interesting. And do keep in mind, I've had a lot of people make knockoffs of my videos. They'll take one of my in-depth history videos like this, and they'll jot down the whole script, reorganize some of it, find all the source photos that I have provided, and then they make their own video of it just 2 weeks later. So if you see any of them, please don't give them any love. And there's a bunch out there actually just run around making videos off of my Wikipedia entries and then not citing their work. Yeah, because if you go through here and if you see who did all this stuff, I didn't do all of it. Please keep that in mind. I didn't do all of it. I haven't even reassessed it. But a good 30 to 60% of everything in here, probably closer to the 60% mark, has been set up by here we go. Half or most of it was made by Daniel Berdishot, one of the leading EXP gurus, just barely before my time. I had just started getting into these cars about the time he had gone ill and then passed away. It was just he had passed just 2 years after I was getting my driver's license and getting into this. So he had done the majority of the work in the EXP wiki up until that point. And then I stepped in during college and I had all this information. I reorganized some of it. I found a lot of missing links, various pieces of information. I added all the tables. I added a bunch of photos. I double-checked references. All of the work I did, I referenced correctly and cited my sources correctly. It's all legitimate. And then people go and make their own freaking YouTube videos reading word for word out of my Wikipedia entries, for goodness sakes. But, oh well. So, please, if you have anything to add, definitely do so. You'll see in the EXP registry that we have that ASC McLaren present. It's listed in there as an 82 EXP. If you have any EXPs that you want to add to the registry, please do so. We have a lot of cars. I got over 100 EXPs here. You can see that ASC McLaren. There it is. 105,498. Pretty low production number. I got I got one that's even older than that, but that's just because I got so many. I got 17 EXPs. Oh, mine all. It adds up fast. I got over. Good grief! I got 17% of all the registered EXPs in here. But if you want to add your car to the registry, or if you have a 1980s Escort that you want to add to the registry, feel free to write me up. Shoot me an email with a photo of your door jam sticker. Otherwise, the last 6 digits of your VIN would suffice. And tell me a little about your car, and we'll jot her down. These have been pretty interesting because we've been able to establish build dates for most of these, just going off of VINs. For cars that don't have door tags, or cars that have sketchy pass. For instance, my convertible, number 1285, it shows a door date of February 1981, but on the bumper, oh, I'm sorry, that one's not mine. There we go. There's mine. So it was made after that. Mine should have been made in Marchish. I don't have a door jam sticker, but my bumper hover is stamped January 26. That's well before the first EXP rolls off the line. So there's a chance that we might be looking at a prototype car amongst my fleet. Things like that. There's 10 to 12 prototype EXPs somewhere out there. And they could just be 1982 EXPs that have had their bumpers changed around. So that's a video for a different time. We've gone on long enough, so I'm going to let you guys go. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to share them. I love reading them. And I notice most of you like reading other people's comments too, and that's fantastic. Kind of my favorite part about these cars is how they connect to people and how people connect to other people through them. It's very fascinating, and I like it. I like it a lot. You gotta further humanity somehow, and if it's a little frog-eyed car that does it, kudos. But yeah, you guys have a nice day. We'll catch you later.